I think the nice part of leadership is also being part of the group and actually doing day-to-day keiko together with your dojo mates. That's so awesome that people are willing to learn from each other and also willing to learn from their juniors, and juniors having no problem to teach their seniors. I am so happy that they're around.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokuskai Inside Look podcast. Today we're speaking with David Smits from Nieuwegein, the Netherlands, who has been training for over 18 years, during which time he's grown into a position of co-leader of the Yushinkan dojo, as well as the European Shinkage Ryu group. David holds the rank of Rokudan in Iaido and was recently awarded Renshi by the Dutch Kendo Federation. In this wide-ranging conversation, we talk about growing up in Iaido, reconnecting with his Japanese heritage, the people he's had the privilege of sharing this journey with, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Many of these topics resonate with my own personal experience, and I look forward to picking David's brain again in the future. I hope you enjoy this interview with David Smits from the Netherlands.
My name is David Smits, or David Akira Smits, and that gives a bit away on my background. My name reveals a bit that my father is Dutch, my mother is Japanese. I'm born and raised in the Netherlands. So I have a bit of Japanese looks. So if you see a picture, you might think, hey, that guy's Japanese. But I stand quite out in a Japanese crowd because I'm almost 1 meter 90 centimeters, close to 2 meters tall. I stand out literally in a Japanese crowd. So born and raised in the Netherlands, and also in language, I speak Dutch and I don't speak Japanese. I would like to try to, but I'm really bad at languages. My parents discovered that at early age, so they stuck to Dutch. By now I speak a few words of other languages, but it's still quite hard to pick up Japanese, which I feel very sorry about. My budo journey started quite early with a lot of kids in the Netherlands doing judo, maybe because of Anton Geesink, I don't know, and did a few Q grades in judo when I was young. Did some ninjutsu in the backyard of a friend of my mother's. Very nice Japanese network, which also helped quite a lot with my Iaido journey. Did karate, Shotokan karate, but also naginata and kendo during my college years. And in my second year of university, a friend of mine told me, like, hey, shall we go to this very peculiar, strange Japanese martial arts called Iaido? At that time, I had no clue what that was. And yeah, sure, why not? And there I joined this beginner's course in a dojo in Utrecht in the center of the Netherlands. And a friend of mine quit immediately. He didn't think it was nice, and I stuck. It's maybe nice to mention at this time I met Elaine van Ommerkloeke. She started at the same day in the same beginner's course in the same dojo. And that's where I was hooked to Iaido. I loved it, I liked it, and from there on, Elaine and I together started doing our exams together. EQ in the Netherlands, Rotterdam. Shodan Nidan Sandan in Brussels, Yonan Godan in Iwakura, close to Nagoya, Aichiken. And last year, 2019, June in Kanazawa, our 6th dan. Winding back 10 years, 2010, the current dojo leader, Aaron Stolwijk, made plans to move to Germany. So he handed over the dojo leadership to myself and Elaine. We grew up together. We have a co-dojo leadership at the Yushinkan dojo in Utrecht. And also at this time, we lead the Shinkage Ryu group in Europe. And to be specific, the Shinkage Ryu in the line of Matsuoka Sensei and Kinomoto Sensei. For the podcast listeners, maybe you know it from the story of David Meriniero. And this is where I am right now.
When you say grew up together, you literally, because you were probably in your early 20s when you started Iaido. So yeah. There's so much going on at that time of life. Did you just dive into Iaido? Iaido was like the second thing part of your life, or was it a hobby initially before you really focused on it?
I think initially, for the first few weeks, it was just a hobby. But for us both, mostly speaking for myself, it grew out to be a lifetime journey with quite some time spent and commitments to that. And indeed, growing up together is quite literally, we were both students at that time. Youngsters, we were the playful kids around in the dojo. Not really kids, we're not kindergarten kids, but still playful in the dojo. So we were the laughing voices in the beginning and the end of Keiko. During Keiko, quite serious. And we grew up during university years, finding ourselves new jobs, totally separate. She has a husband and 2 kids now. I got married, also 2 kids. And yeah, so that's quite literally growing up together indeed. Being the youngsters in the dojo, a bit more seniors, and then being the dojo leaders in the dojo. Yeah.
So this time in becoming a dojo leader, you must have had a lot of people inside the dojo that were older, that have been around longer. Could you talk about some of the people that really influenced how you've kind of taken on these leadership roles or lessons that you learned from them in that sense?
It's quite funny because almost in the first or second year that I started off, at that time, dojo leader already asked me, "Oh, can you help me out with some management tasks?" Of course, we're a very small dojo, Iaido dojo. I think everybody in Europe can relate on how big that dojo could be. And from that moment on, it was already quite clear that the dojo culture was really cooperation and working together. Of course, within budo, we have the very known hierarchy of dan grades and who's teaching and who's not teaching, who's following. But there was a lot of cooperation in at least the management of the dojo. At that time, the current dojo leader was very influential on being ambitious, but just ambitious for yourself, like getting straight on. It's more on ambitious on your work ethics. So it wasn't about getting medals or your dan grades, but just understanding yourself and what you want and what you work for. You don't work for others. It's just your self-motivation. And same for the previous dojo leader, so Aaron Stolwijk, who handed over the dojo leadership to me and Elaine. I actually saw him last weekend. He was here. We had lunch together, and it's a 2-hour drive from him, traveling from the north of the Netherlands to here. And technically, by looking at Dan grade, I outgrew him because he's still fourth Dan, because he didn't do that much Iaido, because there's no dojo in the north of the Netherlands, or at least not close to him. But he is like an older brother to me. I can honestly say, like meeting my own brother. By the way, I don't have a brother, I only have a little sister, but it's somebody who I still look up to, although I don't have any relationship. I do have a relationship with him, but no direct connection within the dojo anymore. And he is quite a no-nonsense person, just liking to train, focus on Keiko, no egos, just enjoy Keiko together. And I think that's also a very important part for me.
Any specific experience you've had with them, whether it's after a seminar somewhere or traveling together or something that really shows his character out and reminds you about this relationship?
Most important thing with Aaron, I think one was a bit darker moment in our dojo history where there was some trouble with his wife, at that time not yet wife, in the dojo with some medical reasons. So he couldn't train for a while and he had a quite hard time. And we're just sitting in it together and discussing how things should move on. And that's where I realized on how important training or having Keiko together is. Because of course, dojo leadership and leading the classes was quite a hard thing. But what really struck me at that moment was that I realized how important Keiko is for somebody, in this case him, in his day-to-day routine. It's not just training, it's just not going to the sports club. It's also not being able to see your friends, because we're dedicating so much of our life to this art. So this is also your social life. So he was missing out. He wasn't able at that time to teach, to enjoy what he loved to do, and missing out on his friends. And that was a great moment that he taught me without maybe not realizing that he was teaching me something. But by telling that was like, wow, yeah, we're not doing it just a sport. And the other one was after a training that we had together, training with our Jikiden friends, inspired by Morita Sensei, doing a lot of kata during the winter months, so in the beginning of New Year's training. We sat down together and we did around 800 Senken Ren kata. So it was a full day of doing kata. And he still is, pretty strong guy, big, quite muscular. And he sat down like, yeah, this is what it's about. I'm like, yeah, because I was at that time quite still a youngster. Yeah, moving a lot. And that's awesome, right? Yeah, no. Yeah, doing kata together. Remember this moment? And I don't know the exact reference, but Mukai Keiko, so standing in front of each other, doing your own kata, but looking at each other, you could feel the connection. I was like, wow. Yeah, and I think that was quite inspirational to me, because he was in Dan grade not that much more senior than I was at that time, one Dan grade difference, at a relatively low Dan grade, third and fourth Dan. But that was also an inspiring moment for me, like, oh, yeah. So that was a bit on Erwin, maybe.
Mm. So that first instance where you realized from him that being at the dojo and being with your community, with these friends, is an important part of the practice, was that something that you had felt already, you just didn't know how to articulate? Or is it something that after that experience, you're like, hey, I'm looking around, this is something that has to mean more than just coming to practice?
Yeah, so that really grew on me during my dojo years, and also going a bit back to my current situation. If I look to, for example, as I already mentioned earlier, Elaine, but also Piotr Kukla, who's also training at the dojo for quite a long time. And as a man, we kind of join hotel rooms together with seminars or European championships. That really grew that feeling, that I would say family feeling. That's also something that Matsuoka Sensei stresses a lot. And that's quite a common phrase that you will hear within our Shinkage group in Europe. It's all about family. And it really feels like that. I really grew up with these people, as I mentioned, together with Elaine. We were youngsters, college kids, university students, graduates, roughly similar jobs during our job career. She got kids, I got kids also. They're also almost the same age. So this whole growing up together, family feeling, it's more than just a sports. The feeling of do or michi, the road that we're traveling, it grew on me. As I mentioned, I'm half Japanese, but not being able to speak Japanese very well. I grew up, of course, in the Netherlands. This was also a way for me to start to understand Japanese culture. And seeing this group together was also a nice way of learning more about that Japanese culture and how group behavior works and interaction is.
This thing about Japanese culture and how you said your parents recognized early that you couldn't get the language as quickly. When you started pursuing this and you started understanding more, I'm sure your family on your mom's side was probably happy that you were getting into this. Do you remember that kind of their reactions to when you started something like Iaido and then when you started being more interested, like going to Japan and learning a little more of the language because you need it for the practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also at a loss for words, but yeah, it's just so nice. And I'm also so lucky that my sensei, Matsuoka Sensei, Kinomoto Sensei, live in Iwakura, close to Nagoya, or a bit north to Nagoya. And my family, one of the brothers of my mother, lives in Toyotashi, just south of Nagoya. So it's just one train ride between Iwakura and Toyotashi. So if I visit my sensei, I can also visit my family. So it's also very practical. And of course, I didn't know that when I started doing Iaido. So that's already the practical link that I can travel to Japan and have the opportunity to visit both. Yeah, trying to learn the language because you need it for Iaido. It's such much more enjoyable for your Iaido, but also to discover a bit on my background, seeing and trying to figure that out on what it actually means. And I cannot say it in any different way, but I still suck at Japanese. If I see some language groups and these Nyongo corner, it's so awesome and how people are learning so quickly over there, but I just can't keep up. But it's so great because what I see happening during Iaido seminars, when my own sensei are over, or the bigger seminars, what we have in the Netherlands or in the UK with Ishida sensei, I see so many things which I sometimes then recognize, like, oh, that's what my mother used to do back at home. And I see so many familiar things, which are, at least for me, slightly familiar, for maybe European people, quite alien. But for me, I see a lot of recognition and I see my youth unfold for the second time, but now with more understanding. So it's not only for me just learning about the art, budo, Iaido, and just learning about the Japanese culture. For me, it's also learning to understand a bit more about myself, my mother, my family, cultural background, which I didn't know that I had until I saw it displayed or acted by my Japanese sensei or even European friends. Like, oh, that's typical Japanese. I didn't know that until I see others doing it. And like, oh, that's why people didn't understand what I was doing at kindergarten, because I was acting Japanese and I didn't know that. So that was, yeah, and still is. I felt like by now I've seen everything that I needed to know about my youth because I'm doing Iaido for roughly 20 years now. What more can I learn? Well, every day is a revelation on my cultural background, the language. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I like it when you were saying how this Shinkage Ryu group has really become family. Family, it's like the word is used everywhere. And it was clear when David Marinero from Spain mentioned it too. It must be hard where, in terms of this family, the parents are Matsuoka sensei and Kinomoto sensei in Japan. They're so far away. Can you talk about how that relationship between you and those senseis started, and then how has it developed over time?
Yeah. So getting back to your what you first mentioned, David Marinero. It's funny because we're both called David. So David Marinero, being Spanish, a bit smaller than me. So the Japanese sensei also refer to him as Mini David. And to me, I'm Akira. So that's also an easy way to distinguish me from other Davids. And it's, of course, my Japanese name. But looking to that group and being family, it's literally a warm welcome with hugs when I go to Spain. It's truly meeting not just friends and looking to the Japanese sensei. It's been a long and strange journey because, of course, some changes in dojo leadership within my own dojo, Yushinkan, but also some changes within leadership within our Shinkage Ryu family that has changed and evolved quite a lot over the years, where slowly I got to see the sensei more and more, first from the back of the dojo and slowly more in front of the dojo because of my own ranks and changes within the group. And now Matsuoka sensei doesn't speak English that much, a few commands and a few things. But as Matsuoka sensei also sometimes jokes, for example, with Elaine, that she is his granddaughter. Well, I think technically she's the age that she could also be her daughter. But during the pandemic, I called both sensei by phone, and Kinomoto sensei speaks a bit of English. So with my bit of Japanese and a bit of English of her, we can have a quite nice conversation. But I also called Matsuoka sensei a few times, and my Japanese is of such level that for traditional Japanese, it's quite difficult to communicate. I can express a few sentences, but if I can't find the words, it's very difficult to find these words in an investigation together. So we had a quite silent conversation for 5 minutes, but it was for me one of the most warmest conversations I had during the pandemic. I had some quite nice conversation with my own family here in the Netherlands, my parents, my wife. But just hearing by the breathing of somebody that somebody is happy, and just like, okay, yeah, we want to meet each other and have keiko together, and it's not possible, because that was the level of conversation. And is everybody okay? Yes, genki desu. But it's just a direct heart-to-heart relationship. Yeah, a direct connection. And of course, there's keiko, and we have to learn about Japanese culture and techniques. But I think that's also one of the most important things that Matsuoka sensei stresses. It's you cannot practice budo if you don't understand human beings, yourself and others. Because even though it's a kasateki, not a real opponent with Iaido, you need to show that you understand other human beings and express yourself. And that's what I really like. And hopefully we see that more and more coming back in our group. I think it's already pretty nice and pretty good. But yeah.
Yeah, that seems like one of those lessons that applies in the Budo world and also outside in your regular everyday life. Do you remember any specific lessons other like these that you received from Matsuoka sensei or from any other person in your Iaido training that you found this thing that I'm learning in Iai is also something that I'm using in my family life, in my work life, and other parts of things that I do?
I think teaching by Louis Vitale sensei, Kate Enman, I don't even know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, although Japanese, roughly translated as a stable home front. I knew it was important, but only learned about it when I first realized what it was and tried to apply it. And only afterwards I learned it from Louis Vitale sensei and also saw it written at his lessons in life from Budo, on how important it is if you're doing something that you need in a stable home front, so a stable personal life, maybe stable income, happy wife, happy kids, actually having a house maybe, but also in the dojo that need to have a stable basis to have good keiko. So if there are constant fights or a lot of noise around or anything like that, you can't focus on the thing that you actually want to do. So get your basics in order so you can train properly. And for me personally, stable home front. Happy wife, happy budo.
Mm-hmm. I could totally understand that from the sense of a dojo, especially if there's changes in leadership or if there's conflict, you always have to be able to manage it just like in real life. Is there anything in terms of lessons you've learned about conflicts between humans that I know as we grow up, we learn, okay, there's certain battles that we don't fight and certain ones that we have to stand up for. What kind of lessons have you learned from the various challenges that you faced in terms of internal dojo or community?
Now, we had our share of conflicts in the dojo, outside the dojo, anywhere. And I think what I learned is work together with other people. If you look at a problem, work together. And I think that's also a constant factor in my budo life, Elaine, because we share common leadership. So there are often times, although sometimes my appearance is quite calm, this Asian thing that there's a lot of emotion under the waterline, and I tend to explode like a volcano, and I'm on the phone yelling at her, not because she did something wrong or I did, there's something wrong between us, but like this person or that person did something wrong and I'm going to kick him or her out of the dojo or get him or her expelled or any bad things. And then she said like, okay, calm down, listen up. So really work together with people, not just that other people can calm you down, but show you the other flip of the coin, how do you call that? The other side. And in that sense, I can say for my budo life and organization and leadership, Elaine is my yin, where I'm sometimes the yang. So really, truly try to cooperate with people. Don't try to manage everything on your own during conflicts, because you learn so much. And I think also what you see in Shinkage Ryu, we've got our famous kamae, the Hiraseiga no kamae, where you stand defending, not attacking, but of course not defenseless. You have your sword in front of you. And you only attack if the opponent attacks you. And then, of course, full force, cut the opponent in half or very surgically make sure that the opponent of person is disabled. And for me, that's also a teaching that I should not try to lash out too quickly. You should make very clear what the playing field is, what can be done and cannot be done. Same as the kamae, it's quite clear. You cannot run into somebody because you will run into that sword. So it should be clear to your opponent or discussion partner what can and cannot be done. And of course, if you come too close in my personal zone, where also my sword happens to be, then you die. But there is so much room for discussion if you don't attack each other. So don't lash out constantly or try to push somebody slowly. Squeeze. Don't try to squeeze somebody to death. Only if you cut somebody down, should be serious and with one cut, but only at the very last moment if you cannot do anything else. And so in conflicts, and I'm still learning, I'm still in that sense very young, although turning 40 this year. Don't lash out, stay calm. And Matsuoka Sensei is such a good example in that. Mm-hmm. Even if you annoy him, he keeps smiling, and he keeps showing you the correct way by giving the right example. So not lashing out to you like that's not good. No. Just showing the right example. And of course, when somebody goes too far, it goes too far and then it's over. But then it's over with one smooth cut, clean. So, yeah.
It's very revealing for someone to be so self-aware of where you can explode and being open to, in this case, I guess Elaine would be that opposite side that helps you calm down. And I find that a lot of dojos has this dual aspect to it. There's two people that balance each other out very well. In my former dojo, we had one that was more that fiery, hot administrator, and then the other that's kind of more gentle and soft as the sensei. And then there's another type of dojo where you have like a sensei that's like the person at the front where everyone sees, and then you have the behind the scenes one that smooths things out on the background. How do you describe you and Elaine as leaders, as co-leaders in your dojo? What is kind of the roles that you play and how do you play off each other?
Well, we're totally different characters. Of course, male, female, she's Dutch, I'm quite Dutch, but sometimes surprisingly Japanese in behavior. But we don't have a typical good cop, bad cop, or I'm always highly emotional and she's never. But we tend to balance that out in some natural way, which also, when she lashes out, I try to calm her down, or vice versa. As I also mentioned, I can also sometimes lash out, or at least in my conversations with Elaine, be a bit harsh, and then she calms me down, like, okay, let's sit down. So in that way, it's not that we always have one specific role and the other is typically soft. What we also have for the last even more than 10 years is also Piotr Kukla around, who does a lot of dojo management tasks. So not being a formal board position and being the secretary and constantly write out emails or treasurer. These tasks were for other people, also amazing jobs, by the way. But Piotr was also still is, although also almost 6 done, doing all these little tasks, making little sheets when people can do exams. So we have that proper overview, preparing lessons, lesson overview, teaching overviews. Okay, this Tuesday, Elaine is teaching, that Tuesday, David is teaching, and now Piotr's also joining in the teaching. So we have also that bit in the background for people who are a bit farther away and don't see everything. But I can honestly say Piotr is our equal, but it's not always noticed by people. And I think if you look to the aspect on dojo leadership and how we cope with that, we are also students of each other. So I teach a day, the other day Elaine teaches, and when the other person is teaching, the other one is truly a student within the group. So the other one really takes a step back. So it's not in the sensei position or in the sensei role, although we might have a downgrade and a former position within the dojo, really step back into the line of the students and train together with the students. And so that's maybe not something on conflict or leadership, but I think the nice part of leadership is also being part of the group and actually doing day-to-day keiko together with your dojo mates, I would say. Mm-hmm. So that might be a nice add-on.
How do you see your responsibility to the other Shinkage Ryu practitioners outside of your dojo in the rest of Europe?
So we have 3 dojo in the Netherlands and a few across Europe, the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Greece, of course. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody. I think we have a few responsibilities which are quite new for us because we're a relatively young group. If you compare us with the Shinden group who have a lot of stuff done, Ishida Sensei did a great job putting this group together with a clear structure. We're still growing, we're very young in that. So we are as me and Elaine, again, together leadership for Europe, our contacts with Japan. So if a message needs to go to Japan, we are responsible in that sense. But also, of course, teaching, we travel around. Once in a while, we go to Spain or Greece for a seminar, mini seminar, together with our local dojo over there. Of course, we have a little seminar in the Netherlands, but I think these are the regular things and responsibilities that everybody knows. Also, a few weeks ago, we had a little pop quiz together with our European Ryu mate via Zoom. So we're meeting each other first, of course, how's everybody, how are things in each country, how's everybody doing personally, how's keiko, can you have training, how is training, is it much different, but a lot of personal touches, and I think keeping that group together, having the true feeling that everybody's part of that group. We're a group, we're a circle. It's not always a pyramid, but it's just being a circle, like doing warming up together in a big circle. So you can see everybody, and everybody is an equal part of that group. I think maybe that's the best way to describe it. I think that is also our responsibility to create that feeling and that community.
Mm-hmm. And I can definitely feel it from the people I've talked to who have mentioned you and Elaine when they talk about just this whole group. So you had mentioned Elaine, Piotr, Erwin, and there was another person, Stan Engelin.
Most of the Iaido, I think also in Europe, know Stan. He's a good Iaido player, very strong Iaido, goes often to European Championship, so it's a well-known player. And I think I've got more seniors around that also done a great job, but I want to mention one of the things that happened a few weeks ago in the dojo with me, Piotr, and Stan. We were training, it was already quite late, almost 11 p.m. Almost everybody already went home. And was just Piotr, me, Stan, and a few people actually watching Piotr because Piotr was training for his 6th dan, trying to do some embu, some demonstration on its own. And where Piotr was trying to do some subri, some sword swings, and where I give a few corrections or feedback. And then Stan started teaching Piotr more and more. And of course, he looked a few times towards me whether it was okay. And yeah, of course, because he's a good player, strong, going for his 5th dan, but technically way beyond his 5th dan. And having people like that, and there are many more, but this is just a recent example. I want to say my dojo, but in my community, that's so awesome that people are willing to learn from each other and also willing to learn from their juniors, and juniors having no problem to teach their seniors. Of course, with each other's permission. That is something that will stick around for quite a while for me. There are many more in the dojo, but this is just a recent example where I am heavily influenced by my juniors and so happy that they're around.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions. You can answer as long or as short as you want. Could you talk about one or two things that people in the general community that you practice with all the time, that you see at seminars all the time, don't know about you, either in your personal life? Could be some other hobby that you have, some interest that you had before you started Iaido and then carried on just a little bit at a time.
Well, I told a bit about my looks in the beginning of this interview, and also people maybe on Facebook or just in real life know I've got quite dark hair, Japanese features. My son is really blonde hair, blue eyes. It's a shocker if you see him. It's truly my son, and if you see my father, being Dutch, myself and my son together, you recognize that. But every time people see my son, they're either burst out in laughing or don't know what to say. And maybe another interesting thing is I think the last few seminars in Spain I went to, I always cried in public. And because the situation with the Spanish was for a few years very difficult, and we did our best and they did their best and very good. But being around with Spanish people is so emotional. It's awesome, but something that I don't do often. And the last few years, every time in Spain, I think I cried in public. It's amazing and something that you don't see me do every day here in the Netherlands or in Japan.
Is there a quote or proverb or something that you live by or practice by? You already mentioned kaite anman, the stable home front. Is there another one?
Yeah, so I have even difficulty pronouncing this one in Japanese. Kino no waru ni kyo wa katsu, or loosely translated, always surpass the one you were yesterday. Of course, very known within the Shinkage Ryu line, or from the Yagyu family. What it also means for me is just do baby steps, not just doing your best, but even if you only improve 0.5% in one day or maybe 1 month, if you only improve 0.5% in 1 month, you can achieve great goals or achieve great things. So yeah, if you just improve a bit every day, just a bit, tiny bit, then life's already great.
That's great. Knowing what you know now, if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, what advice would you give?
Work together with others. And working together, I would say it's not just giving each other tasks. That's not working together, that's working alongside each other. That's already pretty great. If you do that, you're halfway there. But working together is truly listen to others and always be able to give the other person room for their decision or their opinion. And that's so difficult because we are so convinced of our right or correctness in techniques or in therefore also a lot in management. But yeah, be willing to give others room with cooperation. And that's only what I'm seeing from myself trying to develop, not even saying, trying to develop in the last few years. And like, oh, if I could do that earlier, life would be even so much better, nicer, also just for myself. But so yeah, really work together and not just dividing tasks, but truly listen to people and give room for the other person's opinion. And if you can't make a decision, simply let's say like, okay, apparently your opinion is as valuable. Apparently, no, we are sure that your opinion is as good as mine, so let's go with yours.
That's great advice. Something that I need to listen to too as I think about how I lead my dojo. So last thing, did you hear anything in other podcast episodes where you heard someone say something that you might want to comment on, or you might want to build on that idea or share your opinion on something that was said?
Not specifically on words. I listened to a few, but I think it's mostly about you, because what I learned so far about the practitioners, it's awesome. And I almost cannot comment on that. That's just listening to somebody's life journey. That's so great to do. But what I think people should do so much more is just what you are doing by this podcast, is listen and actively listen and find interesting things and dare to ask. Because we often listen very passively we just hear the words and try to remember that. But like, okay, what does that actually mean? Or of course, with these podcasts, what you are doing. So what does that mean for you? How come you made that decision? Or how did that influence you? That type of listening, that's something that, that's a great thing. So to comment on you, great. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. And again, thank you for doing this and setting this up.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is available on most common podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe to not miss out on new interviews as they are posted. We're always looking for feedback to improve, so please write us a review or drop us a line at podcast@tokushikai.ca or on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada. Until next time, thanks for listening.